In this video, we'll review how to use our average data carbon footprint calculator to determine your Scope 1 and Scope 2 carbon footprint. You'll find it at our netzeroanalysis.com website under the Carbon Neutrality heading and by selecting the Carbon Footprint Calculator tab. Select the Average Data tab, and that'll bring you to our calculator, which is based on average energy use by occupancy type and can be used if you don't have access to all your actual energy use data. For contact information, please provide a name, phone number, and/or email address so that we may get a hold of you if additional information has been requested. For building information, you'll be required to select a country and, if in the United States, a state, the building area unit of measure, and your electricity source. For countries, we've provided several to choose from. If you don't see yours listed, please select the nearest country. Our selection will be for the United States. And we are in Illinois. Our unit of measure is by square feet, and our electricity source is typical grid-sourced electricity. Now, if we had solar or wind, or had a PPA with a solar or wind provider, we would select solar or wind-generated electricity. If you use both grid and solar or wind-generated electricity, you'll have to use the actual data calculator to separate those. Based on your selection of square feet or square meters as a unit of area measurement, you'll be directed to the appropriate section to provide information which will determine your average annual energy usage. Since we selected square feet, we'll be filling out the upper portion. If we had selected square meters, we would have been directed to fill out the lower section. There's only a couple things to fill out. You'll have to indicate the occupancy type. If you work from home and don't have a dedicated space, then you would select home office. Put in the number of people that work at home. And your average usages will be figured out automatically. If you have a dedicated room at home, then you would select office and put in the square footage of that area. In this case, it's not based on the number of people, so we don't need that information. If you are a restaurant, your water usage would be determined by the number of seats. And if you're residential, it'll be determined, the water usage, that is, will be determined on the number of occupants. So we'll leave these settings as is and move on. If you do compare this to the actual data calculator, chances are the numbers are not going to match because your actual usage may be more or less than the average that the Department of Energy provides. Under the vehicle emissions section are areas that you can input your vehicle usage. In our case, we've got gas vehicles that are calibrated by miles per gallon, and in this particular case we get 20 miles per gallon and we're driving 100,000 miles a year. If we had other vehicles, we'll say with diesel, we could input that information. Same thing, 20 and 100,000 miles. If you had other vehicles with CNG, propane, or E85, you could enter those as well. Once all that input is completed, it will update the results section and increase the amount of carbon emissions. The other fuel emissions section can be used to record fuels measured by quantity. In this case, if we use gas, And let's say we just use 10 gallons for miscellaneous usages. We can enter it here. Same for diesel. Let's say we use 100 gallons. Maybe there's a generator. And as you enter these values, it will update the results section. The results section will give you an overview of the inputs you provided and their metric tons of carbon emissions. In our case, we emitted 24 metric tons of carbon from our electricity use, 103 metric tons from other uses outside of electricity, and since we didn't have any inputs for wind or solar, we did not have any emissions. Our total was 127 metric tons of carbon, and it equates to 279,987 pounds of CO2 emissions. In our case, we've selected to go to 100% carbon neutral. So we're going to sequester 279,987 pounds of carbon, which is 127 carbon offsets. And we have a few tabs down at the bottom. If you hit reset, it'll change all the input that was provided back to the original settings. So if we go ahead and do that, we'll see that everything is back to the original data information. If you want to print your information, hit print all and you can send it to a device. Or you can hit submit and the information will be sent to our office. If you'd like to purchase carbon offsets, you can hit the offset your carbon footprint now. It'll take you to the Entrex Carbon Market website to provide information and execute your trade. Net zero analysis. Carbon neutral now. Net zero emissions 2030.